Dixie, I think you have to go against your name
Okay.
and click on there and then
Rename.
rename. Yeah. Ghansham.
Yeah. So I'm audible?
Yeah,
Yes,
very
sir.
much.
Okay. So my laptop basically, it's getting updated. It is starting from 0%. So
This is this
Windows.
this is a very common problem, but generally it happens when you have got a session.
So I thought
Anyway,
I
it will take. Don't worry, Dexter. I will take some 7-8 minutes. So
no, that's okay. I'm comfortable with this right now. Yeah.
Good evening, Ghanasam sir. Good evening.
Good
And
evening.
Ted
Hi,
Dev, very good.
Chandrakant. Good
Hi,
evening.
sir. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Good
Kanishka,
evening, sir.
good evening,
Yeah,
Kanishka sir.
anemia iron पढ़ा हो गया बस
Sanat, how long we should wait?
Another 2 to 3 minutes, then we'll start.
Sure. So if you want to make it live, I will do that. Hmm?
No, okay, we can do. Just wait, sir.
Dr. Sanjay Mishra has joined.
Another 15 doctors will join.
They can join in between. See,
We'll start.
Daksab has got another program, so I'm thinking about that also.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So what time that starts, sir? 7:30? Dr. Apurva Ghosh is joining.
Yes. Yes, yes.
So that's not a problem, sir. If it is scheduled at some time, we will go ahead with it. That's the only thing. I have no
Sure.
issues.
Sure, sure. No, we'll start in another 1 or 2 minutes.
Sure, sure.
Yes, yes, yes. Right.
So how much updation has taken place, sir? 30%?
No, no, mine. I am using this laptop now. I have
Change
switched
the
it off.
laptop. Acha.
Yeah. There are times when I have used my mobile and I have presented. So
No. Actually, Rasa, whenever I'm conducting any session, what I've got two laptops. One is, of course, this one a brand new, another one very old one, and I keep my presentation in thumb drive because it's a very live problem. Because very often it happens suddenly it will start updating, and then you don't know what to do then.
you can't even switch it off.
You can't even switch it off. So you have to. The best thing is then I switch on another one and then try to stream it through that.
Good morning, madam. Yeah, madam. Good morning, Apurva sir.
Good evening. Good evening.
Good evening. Sorry. Good evening. Good evening.
Dr. Kunal Kishore.
Good evening, sir.
Sir, before you start with can start with a live Facebook.
Yeah, I will do that.
Then we can start.
So now we have gone live. Okay. It's raining in Bangalore. It's raining quite heavily. Can you hear me,
Oh,
Sanat?
yeah. You're audible.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Though you are having that impending cyclone in east, but it's raining in Bangalore.
The moment you're prepared, it doesn't rain.
No, it's raining. It has been raining for almost last 4 5 days. It had the effect of the previous cyclone also. I think we can start now, Sanat,
Yes, boss. Yes, boss.
right?
Yes, boss.
So good evening, doctors. And this is Pankaj Srivastava from Biotexis Pharma. I'm working in the capacity of head marketing and training. And in the next couple of minutes, I just want to share with you a little bit about our company before I hand over to Dr. Chandrakant for this lively session. Uh, so this is, I'm just sharing my slide deck. Well, I'm based in Bangalore. And once again, on behalf of Biotexis Pharma, I heartily welcome all the participants for this webinar on a working day when you have got many other important things to do. You have decided to devote this 1 hour for this session. I'm indebted for that. The topic for today is treatment of iron deficiency anemia in cancer patients, right? And I would also like to welcome Dr. Chandrakant MV for consenting to share his thoughts on this above mentioned topic. Now, in the next couple of minutes, I just want to take you through what for Biotexis Pharma stands. Now, this company was started some 1.5 years back when Mr. Sanat Mathi, who's also present here, he was interacting with some of the doctors, some of the oncologists, and they suggested that there are quite a good number of nutraceuticals and other products which, when are given along with the anti-cancer drugs, they help in the accelerated recovery, in the faster recovery of these cancer patients. And of course, they also offer a better quality of life. Now, this thought stuck in his mind, and with that thought, of course, he conceived this Biotexis Pharma, and it started operating from say 1.5 years back. Now, whenever any organization is starting, obviously, the first thing what it decides is on the mission. So, what for Biotexis Pharma is all about? Well, Biotexis Pharma's mission has been to challenge the unmet medical and societal needs through a comprehensive pharmaceutical value across the country, right? And of course, our focus in Biotexis Pharma is on helping patients and improving the quality of life for millions of people who rely on us. Now, once the mission was thought about it, then of course, next thing is the vision. What's the vision of this? So initially, we decided that in Biotexis Pharma, we will be concentrating in the oncology segment because that is where this entire thought was that how we can actually help the ailing cancer patients in alleviating and mitigating their risk and offering them a better quality of life. So our vision in oncology was to help patients by redefining the cancer treatment paradigm with newer medicines. And of course, we turn ideas into life-changing medicines because most of the ideas, they emanate from the medical fraternity on the unmet these medical needs. So based on that, whenever we are getting these ideas, we are transforming that into the cutting edge technologies, and we are offering therefore the medicines which can take care of this problem. Now, you will also appreciate that whenever any organization is formed, apart from mission and vision, there are certain core values which drive the organization. So I'm happy to share with you that one of the core value of Biotexis Pharma is the innovation. Because as you will appreciate that if we want to be ahead of the disease, it is very essential that we should be able to have some cutting edge technology products with which we can actually take care of our cancer patients. So in Biotaxis Pharma, we decided that we will be coming out with newer and newer medicines uh, with the sole intention of certain amount of innovation with which we are driving this organization. Second value which we decided was the confidence. Whenever our people, they are interacting with the medical profession, it is very essential that our people must have confidence in the company, confidence in themselves, and confidence in the products, so that they can also
was
translate
investigating
this
access
so that they can also translate this confidence onto the medical fraternity. Third is the respect. Well, you will appreciate this was one core value which we decided at the beginning, with which we will be guiding our operations. Respect for the medical profession, respect for our business partners like distributors, chemists, and everyone who is in the ecosystem of taking care of the patients. So this is also one of the fundamentals with which we operate. Respect. Third is the solid. Fourth is the solidarity. Now we are, and it's so coincided that when we launched the organization, barely it was some 3-4 months old, and the COVID struck, and we were in some difficult situations. Now you will appreciate whenever you are in a different situation, it's very essential that during thick and thin, we are all together. So solidarity was one core value which we decided will guide our company, so that whatever resources are there, we are able to pool those resources, and we are able to tide over the pressing issues which were there during the COVID period last year. And even now also we are confronting that. And lastly, of course, the customer delight. Well, most of the organizations, you will appreciate, have been talking about this term, customer delight. But we decided we really want to actually live this value. Now, how to live this value? Well, there are so many things which are there, but one thing what we decided for our company was walk the talk. So whatever we commit, we fulfill that. We will only commit to that extent which we can fulfill, and we should fulfill before actually the stipulated time. So these are the 5 core values with which Biotaxis Pharma operates in the marketplace. Having said that, of course, we want to partner, we want to collaborate with our healthcare professionals. And with this, you might be thinking, that's who we are as a Biotaxis Pharma. Well, there are 4 things which guide us. First thing is, we want to offer the best quality standard medicines. All the quality management system adheres to the good manufacturing practices. We also provide novel and differentiated scientific solutions, and of course, innovation. I mean, innovative products. We have introduced till now, and of course, moving forward also, we want to come out with newer and newer products. Now, you will also appreciate that though it's a nascent organization, but we are also quite aware about our corporate social responsibilities. So in Biotaxis Pharma, we decided environment is very important. So we want to contribute in our humble way, in our nimble way. We want to contribute towards this corporate social responsibilities. And what we have started doing is, one, we have started from last year itself planting trees to our satisfaction. Second was there are a lot of destitute children. So we decided we will adopt certain numbers, and we will provide the child education for them. Last year, Amphan cyclone hit. I mean, right now also we are going to, and we are anticipating another cyclone tomorrow. And last year when Amphan hit, in collaboration with some doctors, we provided relief to close to 2,000 families, in our own humble way, so that they can come back to their normal life. So mind you, it is just 1.5-year-old organization, but we are in our own way trying to contribute towards this cause also. Lastly, what are the product range? Quickly, I'll just share with you. Texcalmin is one first product what we introduced, which is curcumin, which is available in capsule as well as in syrup form, 500 mg. Second product, of course, is Texfer, which is a combination of iron supplements along with polysaccharides for better absorption. Third product is Texpro, because cachexia is also a major problem in cancer patients. And because of the anorexia, I mean, these patients, they don't eat properly, and protein requirement increases, as we all know. So we decided we'll come out with whey protein powder. This 30-gram powder contains 15.5 grams of whey protein, And lastly, many doctors, they suggested that, platelet count also comes down in cancer patients. So we have come out with BioPlate, which is containing curcuma, extract, along with many other ingredients also. So this is the product range what currently we have. And lastly, I must welcome now Dr. Chandrakant MV, who is our today's speaker. Now, I mean, if I have to introduce him, I had gone onto the Google, and I was trying to find out about his all the accolades which he has been able to get in last 16-17 years, and it was running in almost 4-5 pages. So then I requested Dr. Saab, I said, give me at least a little summary, because if I have to read that, it will read in 4-5 pages if I have to share all the publications what he has. So let me share with you that Dr. Chandrakant MV, he is a renowned oncologist in Andul Road, Havana. He has been practicing oncology for last 16 years. He is a qualified MBBS honors, MD internal medicine, DM medical oncology, DNB, ECMO, MRCP medical oncology. He has vast experience in the field of oncology and has been associated previously with Tata Memorial Hospital, Mumbai. And that is from where I think he has published a lot of papers. Currently, he is working in Narayana Super Specialty Hospital in Calcutta. So I think this is a brief account what I could give about Dr. Chandrakant MV. And now I would like to hand over Dr. Chandrakant MV to all of you to share his thoughts about this topic, today's topic. So over to you, sir. That was Carica papaya, sorry, that BioPlate. Yeah, one correction. Carica papaya and many other ingredients are there. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, sir, for that excellent introduction, and also introducing Biotex's what it is, how it was developed, and what are the aims and objectives when you got into it. So I think my screen is visible.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So, I would thank everyone for joining. As Mr. Pankaj said, that in a busy day, we have all joined to look into a subject which we already know. So let us revise what we already know, and let us try to understand and get some take-home messages before we conclude the session. So when I said the Biotaxis people, so I will present on Texfer, which is your molecule that is iron polysaccharide. They said, no, sir, we want it to be academical. We are not, this is not a sort of a promotional meet. We want it to be academical. So that's why I've kept it a little academical than saying only about the product what they have. So let us see what is the magnitude of anemia. So this is in the next 10 minutes, maybe you can increase to 20 minutes or 25 minutes. You will see all these things, how important is anemia in cancer, why anemia happens in cancer, is there a role of ESAs, erythropoietin stimulating agents, what are the guidelines, and what is all about iron supplementation. So, well, we all know that the most common symptom in cancer is fatigue. So patient says, he of course says about the organ of origin, but when it's an advanced disease, patient always says fatigue. And we cannot say that this fatigue is because of cancer, and once the cancer is fine, you'll be fine. So when there is fatigue, we always have to find out what are the reversible cause of fatigue, which we can reverse, and that will improve his quality of life. So the moment the patient starts feeling better, then he will have the motivation to take these anti-cancer drugs, his compliance increases, and his quality of life becomes better. So anemia is one of the reversible causes of fatigue, which can be easily addressed with oral medications or if required blood transfusions and so on. And therefore, fatigue is a reflection of underlying anemia. So if you don't correct anemia, it has adverse effects on outcome in cancer patients. So you can see the overall survival according to the hemoglobin level in a prospective study of 450 odd patients. And you can see those patients who had a low hemoglobin die sooner, or have a lesser survival than those patients who have a high hemoglobin. So the argument can be that dying people have lesser hemoglobin. So that's also right. It can be both ways. Patients who have low hemoglobin die sooner, or the patients who are dying will have low hemoglobin. Both the arguments are right. But however, with whatever evidence we have, if we can improve this hemoglobin, the quality of life definitely improves, and his compliance to cancer treatment improves, and the feeling of well-being improves, and thereby it improves oncology related outcomes. So we are not speaking of immunotherapy molecule that improves survival by 2.5 weeks and therefore it got a FDA approval. We're speaking of simple anemia. If we can focus on it in a busy onco OPD, we may say 7.6 hemoglobin, what to do. The patient is concerned, so we are not concerned. We are concerned of what is the CT scan, what is the imaging, what is the progression, what is the cytogenetics. So these, but patient is concerned of my hemoglobin was 8.2, how it became 7.6. That is his major concern. So that is his perceived importance of hemoglobin. He's not concerned of WBC. He's not concerned of peripheral smear. He wants his hemoglobin to be as high as possible. So that makes him happy. So improving hemoglobin, correcting anemia improves quality of life in these individuals and their adherence to anti-cancer therapy. So then what we have understood is cancer is an inflammatory environment. So what we call as anemia of chronic disease, a lot of cytokines being there, and therefore there are precursors, there is enough iron, but these RBC precursors are not able to take up the iron and incorporate iron in the heme molecule. So there is something like a poverty among plenty. So because of this anemia of chronic disease, there is some ineffective utilization of available iron stores. If you can do TIBC levels, ferritin levels, and iron saturation, they are usually normal in cancer patients, but they do have anemia, and this is mainly because of an inflammatory environment. So this is some large prospective observational study. What they studied some 800 odd patients. They found 63% were anemic. It is quite high in our scenario if you have an advanced cancer. The incidence increases with increasing stage and worsening PS. At more the advanced stage, more bad the patient looks, that is the higher the chance of anemia being there, and more important it is to correct in those patients, because that is a reversible cause. We may not be able to cure him of his brain metastasis soon, but anemia is a correctable one which we can correct. So hemoglobin is inversely related with the inflammatory markers, hepcidin, ferritin, erythropoietin, and reactive oxygen species, whereas it is positively correlated with leptin, albumin, cholesterol, and antioxidants. So this is the multivariate analysis they did from that big study, and they found out with these. So if you look into any cause of anemia, a simple common sense is either there is less production or there is more loss. So the more loss can be because of bleed. We can lose blood from various bleeds, or you can have hemolysis. There is destruction within the body, or there is less production of RBC. So these are the probable causes of anemia which we can think of in any individual, not just in cancer. So this is the WHO grading of anemia in cancer. So if you have 10 hemoglobin, to lower limit it is grade 1. If it is 8 to 10, it is grade 2, and then grade 3 is 6.5 to 8, and grade 4 is less than 6.5. So remember, if it falls less than 8, then it becomes grade 3, 4. And in oncology, usually we keep this grade 3 and grade 4 as an indication of transfusion. But again, just not the hemoglobin value, it is the patient's perception of fatigue. So we can have a patient who has 6.8 hemoglobin or 7.2 hemoglobin, still asymptomatic for it. Or you can have a patient who has 8.8 hemoglobin, still symptomatic for it. So it is the adaptation, or it is how his body has adapted to that low hemoglobin levels, how gradually or how soon the anemia has developed. So all these matter before. So these numbers are just for us as guidelines, but we do consider transfusion in a patient who has 8.8 hemoglobin, or I may withhold transfusion even if the hemoglobin is 7.2. So, but these are the rough numbers which I can put and grade anemia. So these are the probable mechanisms of anemia. Direct effects of neoplasms.
Leading to that in the OC
So I think the host can mute rest all participants. Yeah. So it can be direct effects of neoplasms or products of neoplasms or effects of cancer treatment. So how can it be direct effect of neoplasm? There can be a bleed which is external internal, or it can be an impaired absorption or bone marrow replacement. So if you look into the products of cancers, we know amyloid deposits causing anemia, or there can be an autoimmune phenomena because of CLL. There can be an inflammation, a lot of interferons, interleukins come along. And we know so cancer causes anemia, and the treatment also causes anemia. So that's the problem. So when I give chemotherapy, there is a dose-dependent marrow suppression. And if we give MDS, AML, and then autoimmune hemolytic anemia, all these are side effects of chemotherapy. And radiation causes direct marrow toxicity and thereby causing anemia. So what are the rationale for aggressive anemia management? There has always been a saying, anemia is an adaptive mechanism by the body. So if the hemoglobin is reduced by the body, if you correct it, the cancer cell also will multiply. So this was some postulation that we should not overcorrect anemia. We should not keep the hemoglobin levels up to 13. So we also follow this sort of a rule. We don't overcorrect anemia. We just keep the anemia, the hemoglobin levels around 8, 10, 11. That is the range what we are keeping. We are not trying to transfuse blood. We are not targeting for a hemoglobin above 13 or 14. So the way we say fever is a protective mechanism. If you give a lot of antipyretics, the core temperature is reduced. So this may increase the bacterial proliferation. Similarly, anemia is postulated to be an adaptive mechanism by the body to reduce the blood supply even for the cancer cells. So we should not be trying to overcorrect anemia but to keep a hemoglobin level above 13 or 14, but it should be good enough to preserve a proper quality of life of an individual. So just to say, if I have anemia, there is hypoxia. And when there is hypoxia, we know that for the radiation or chemotherapy to work, there should be adequate oxygen delivery to these target cells, because it is the oxygen-free radicals that are going to ultimately damage these cancer cells. So therefore, we need to correct anemia to the extent of maintaining a proper quality of life. So just to say that 1/4 of whole population in the world, one out of 4 will have anemia, and the treatment of anemia is not just correct anemia but also find out why the anemia has happened. And when you supplement iron, your iron supplementation is not just sufficient to supplement the loss, but also you have to replenish the stores. And another one is, if there is only iron deficiency without anemia, should I treat it? The answer is yes. So don't wait for the iron deficiency to cause anemia. If you have found, this is in general to any patient, not just cancer patients. So if you have iron deficiency, even without anemia, please go in. For whatever reason, you did a screening test and you found iron to be low, either T saturation is low, then you have to supplement iron, because majority of times it will take a little more longer time for the anemia to develop. Patient will have other symptoms like burning in feet or diffuse symptoms, which the subtle ones which may not pick up. So we should not wait for iron deficiency to become anemia. We should treat it even before anemia happens, if at all we are picking. So these are some symptoms of anemia. If you look into the symptoms of iron deficiency as such, it can be because of anemia, like fatigue, weakness, and so on. Or in children, it can result in a neurodevelopmental delay. And we know pica and pagophagia. And there is some bituria, which they call, and there's something called restless leg syndrome that we see in elderly. So these are some non-anemic manifestations of iron deficiency. So iron deficiency, yes, it manifests with anemia, but these are non-anemia manifestations of it just not affects the hematological cell lines. It also causes systemic abnormalities by causing all these symptoms. So should we correct iron deficiency without anemia? The answer is yes. There was a randomized controlled trial. They included patients who had hemoglobin hemoglobin about 12 and 12 or more and ferritin less than 50. And they replenished the stores. There was improvement in fatigue. There was improvement in athletic performance, sleep disturbance, and fingernail breakage abnormalities. And once you correct, it persists for 3 months, and routine iron administration to individuals without iron deficiency is not advised. We cannot prescribe iron without having a documented iron deficiency. So just like if someone asks to give me some vitamin tablets, you cannot routinely prescribe iron unless you are sure that there is an iron deficiency. So it is not a multivitamin I can give to, because this keeps accumulating in the body. So not like water-soluble vitamins like B2, B1, and so on, where if it is excess, they get excreted, but iron starts piling. So it should not be prescribed routinely in patients who do not have iron deficiency. Iron deficiency without anemia, yes, don't wait for anemia to develop. You can correct iron deficiency, because we have a randomized trial where they have shown improvement in non-anemic symptoms like fatigue improvement, athletic performance, sleep disturbance, fingernail breakage, and so on. So what does 1 unit of packed RBC give? It's a total volume of 300 ml. The volume of RBC is approximately 200 ml, and iron is 200 milligram in the form of hemoglobin. And increase in hemoglobin is approximately 1 gram per deciliter, and increase in hematocrit is approximately 3 percentage points. So what is that important in older individuals? The problem in older individuals is the tolerance to oral iron. So they say, so in older people, the whole problem is constipation. So we have a lot of older patients with cancer. Their only symptom is constipation. They are not worried of breathlessness. They're not worried of chest pain. They are symptomatic only for constipation. So if you give oral iron, in those patients, constipation is an issue, and they're on routine PPIs. So it causes less absorption. And in these patients who are older individuals, what you can do is you can use a lower dose of oral iron, or you can do an alternate day iron, or you can have a lower threshold to change to IV iron. So, so this is the indications what we use. If you have a hemoglobin less than 11, ferritin less than 500, a TSAT less than 20%, if I give 1 gram of IV like ferric carbamide maltose, there is an increase in hemoglobin and there is less blood transfusion requirement. So these are the oral preparations we all have in the market. We had ferric maltol and ferrous fumarate, ferrous gluconate, ferrous sulfate, polysaccharide iron complex, and various other over-the-counter formulations are existing. So you have different strengths of actual tablet versus the elemental iron being different. I'll be telling you about the polysaccharide complex a little later, but there is no head-to-head comparison, which is better, which is not better. So the efficacy is all about the amount of elemental iron present in it. If a patient is not tolerating 100 milligram of elemental iron, then you can come down onto a product which has a lesser amount of elemental iron. So the intolerability is directly proportional to the amount of elemental iron in that. So if I have a product that has a lot of elemental iron, for example, I gave I won't name the brand. If you give an iron tablet that has a lot of elemental iron in a 70-year-old individual, he will have a lot of GI side effects like constipation, stomach pain, not able to eat, vomiting, and so on. So in those patients, what you can do is you can change to a brand which has lesser amount of elemental iron, or you can use alternate day administration. So for that matter, polysaccharide is one which is sort of free of these GI side effects and has a reasonably good amount of elemental iron. So as far as tolerance is concerned, this polysaccharide iron complex a little bit expensive than the other, but has a good tolerance or toxicity profile. So the preparations such as polysaccharide iron complex and heme iron are more expensive. These preparations are effective and may have advantages like there is no issue with GI disturbance or there is no issue with metallic taste when I use polysaccharide iron. So what are the strategies to improve tolerability of oral iron? So we can increase the interval to every other day if not done already. Or you can make dietary modifications. So we usually say that you should not take milk or food along with iron. But if a patient is not tolerating that amount of elemental iron, we can say you take it with food. We are okay with a little bit lesser absorption. Or you can switch the formulation, as I said, from a larger strength of elemental iron, because we have seen that the GI side effects are proportional to the amount of elemental iron. So you can switch from a larger strength to a lesser strength. So switch from a tablet to a liquid form, and this is a little bit easier to titrate the dose. So whom should you treat? Regardless of the presence of symptoms, all patients with iron deficiency anemia and iron deficiency without anemia should be treated. The cause of iron deficiency must be identified and addressed, especially in adults with new onset iron deficiency. So if an elderly man comes with iron deficiency, always search for occult bleed and occult GI malignancies, because that is one of the most common reasons. So when should you transfuse blood? If the patient is severely symptomatic, you want rapid correction. For example, a patient has a myocardial ischemia. In those patients, you have to correct. Or if the hemoglobin is less than 7 and so on. So oral versus IV iron, uncomplicated iron deficiency anemia, if you have with oral iron is preferred because of its ease of administration. However, IV iron formulations with improved toxicity profile has lowered the threshold. So we had Hemfer, we had IM injections of iron, which we used to have, and we have heard of stories of anaphylaxis and the patient requiring adrenaline and so on. But in the present day, IV iron formulations are free of these allergic side effects. So we can have a lower threshold to use IV iron in contrast to what we had before. So we use IV iron when treating pregnant women, individuals with inflammatory bowel disease, gastric surgery, or chronic kidney disease, or in patients of cancer who are on erythropoid stimulating agents. So all oral iron preparations are equally effective. The dose of oral iron depends on patient's age, estimated iron deficit, the rapidity with which the correction is needed, and side effects, which include metallic taste, a number of GI side effects that correlate with the dose of elemental iron. So it should be taken either every day, or you can take it even every other day, that's fine. So when you prefer IV iron, if there is ongoing blood loss, you have occult GI primary, in those patients, you will prefer IV iron. Physiologic or anatomic abnormality that interferes with absorption of iron. And there are intolerable side effects to oral iron. So adverse events have reduced when we had high molecular weight irons like Dextran and so on. So routinely, if we are using ferric carbamyl maltose or other IV preparations, we routinely do not use Avil or Hydrocort before unless they have a hypersensitivity. So we expect a response with the resolution of symptoms and modest reticulocytosis happening in around 10 days and normalization of hemoglobin in around 2 months' time. So if there is lack of response, always go whether the patient was compliant with it or is my diagnosis right for anemia? And always look into malabsorption syndromes if there is associated. So this is some comparison of blood transfusion versus erythropoid stimulating agents or non-blood transfusion ways to do. So if you give blood transfusion, the advantage is there is a rapid correction, but the problem is you can introduce HCV, HPV, and so on, transfusion reactions, volume overload, iron overload, and so on. The problem with erythropoid stimulating agents is like darbepoetin or erythropoietin, what we use. Problem is thrombosis, reduced survival, and cost-benefit ratio. So I will present few slides in coming 5 minutes on these ESAs. Is there a role of these? So we know erythropoietin is the one that acts on the distal convoluted tubule. We have the JJ apparatus we have. So that is where EPO is produced. So basically these ESAs or darbepoetin basically came for patients on CKD with hemodialysis. Later on in 2005, they came up with chemotherapy-induced anemia, and there was a controversy saying that erythropoietin not only multiplies hematopoietic stem cells, but also multiplies cancer cells. Therefore, if you give erythropoietin, they have inferior survival. So this was the controversy that we had. But later on, there was so much of meta-analysis, so many trials came up. This is a Cochrane meta-analysis. You have 90 trials with 20,000 odd participants. And definitely, if you use darbepoetin or whatever type of recombinant erythropoietin, it does reduce number of RBC transfusions. But there is a significantly increased risk of venous thromboembolism. It improves quality of life scores. It has increased mortality, provided you continue to give these ESAs if you target the hemoglobin above 12. But if you stop the moment hemoglobin target is reached at 11 or 12, then the mortality is not increased, and there is an increased risk of hypertension. So this is basically in patients who are having cancer and who are undergoing chemotherapy, not routinely. So cancer chemotherapy going on in those patients in the present scenario where you have to admit the patient in the COVID scenario, getting a bed is difficult. So blood transfusion is a big challenge. And also the number of donors available are also less in this present scenario. So therefore, it becomes more relevant in the present scenario to use these recombinant erythropoietin and so on. Very importantly, when you use these erythropoietin stimulating agents in practice, that will cause a iron hungry environment. So when there is a artificial hunger created, you must have liberal supplementation of iron, either oral iron or it can be IV iron. So I'll come to it later. So it causes an artificial iron deficiency when I use ESAs. So therefore, supplementing iron should become an important component of this. So then, so there can be optimal responses or suboptimal responses to ESAs. That's fine. So what are the guidelines for erythropoietin use? So as I was saying, it should be used only in patients who have cancer and who are on active chemotherapy, and they should be undergoing treatment with a palliative intent. This is not for patients who are undergoing curative therapy. And then if it's an MDS, the erythropoietin level should be less than 500. And in diseases like other hematological malignancies, the risk of thrombosis is high. Therefore, transfusion is preferred over erythropoietin. So whether it is alpha, beta, darbepoetin, all are equivalent in their efficacy. So we should use in caution with patients who have thromboembolism or who are post-op or immobile. In those patients, we should be using. So we should target hemoglobin up to 12 and don't go beyond it, and start erythropoietin stimulating agent when hemoglobin is less than 10. If it is less than 8 or less than 7, you need transfusion for rapid recovery. After that, we can start erythropoietin stimulating agents. If there is no significant improvement in hemoglobin, like not even 1 gram increase in over a period of 2 months, then you discontinue. That means it is a failure of treatment. Very important is erythropoietin stimulating agents causes artificial iron deficiency. It causes extra hunger in these patients. So in these patients, you have to give liberal iron supplementation and always use in palliative setting. So we have alpha, darbepoetin alpha, and clinical evidence says that it reduces transfusion requirement, faster hemoglobin response, improves quality of life, and so on. These are the doses we have, and this is about. So how do you assess iron deficiency? So what is transference actually? It is serum iron by total iron binding capacity, and we have ferritin. So when erythropoietin is used, it increases iron requirements, as I said. So what are the types of iron deficiency in cancer? We have what is called absolute iron deficiency, where you really have a deficient iron with a transference saturation less than 20% or ferritin less than 30. And you can have what is called functional iron deficiency. There is a lot of iron available, but the TSAT is less than 50 and the ferritin is up to 800. Still, we consider it as functional iron deficiency. There is stores, but it is not getting incorporated into the RBC. This is what we call as functional iron deficiency, which is difficult to treat. Absolute iron deficiency, there is iron deficient, less iron available, less in the stores. You give iron, it gets corrected. Whereas in functional, the saturation is less, but not that less to that of absolute iron deficiency, but the stores are there. There is enough store, but still there is anemia. This is called functional. That is because the stores are not getting incorporated for manufacturing. So let us come to oral versus parenteral iron. Multiple trials with contradicting results. So one trial says this is better, that is so. So therefore, whenever there are confusing results, we want a meta-analysis. What it says. So the conclusion of meta-analysis is parenteral iron, when given with erythropoietin stimulating agent, improves hemoglobin response and reduces transfusion requirement compared with oral iron or no iron. So if you are using erythropoietin stimulating agent, then parenteral iron is preferred. So what are the guidelines of iron supplementation? If you have absolute iron deficiency, the TSAT is less than 20 and the ferritin is also less, their oral iron is preferred because of the ease of administration. If there is intolerance, use IV iron. And if there is absolute iron deficiency and you are using ESA, still you can use oral iron if there is absolute iron deficiency. But if you have functional iron deficiency, the meta-analysis says that IV iron is preferred because the oral iron is not sufficient enough for hemoglobin increment. So for all practical purposes, if there is any iron deficiency, absolute, then oral iron is preferred because of ease of administration and cost-benefit ratio. If you have functional iron deficiency, then, and if you're using an erythropoietin stimulating agent, then IV iron is preferred. So let me come to the conclusion of the talk. So correcting anemia improves quality of life in cancer patients. If you can improve quality of life, it improves compliance. They can follow proper anti-cancer therapy, and thereby it also improves cancer-related outcomes. In hematological malignancies, we prefer transfusion over ESAs. We don't give ESAs except in low-risk MDS. Blood transfusion only when you want rapid reversal of symptoms. Erythropoietin, there was a concern for disease progression, and this concern is important only if you increase the hemoglobin levels more than 12. Erythropoietin stimulating agents should not be used in curative malignancies. It should be used only when you use chemotherapy, and use when hemoglobin is less than 10, and keep the target less than 12. Don't overshoot it. And you must use iron supplementation. Oral iron is preferred in all patients except in patients who have functional iron deficiencies and you are using ESAs. So that is about the ESA and all that. So the coming few slides is on iron polysaccharide. How is it different from ferrous sulfate? So you can look into the iron polysaccharide. It has a higher absorption rate when compared to the conventional one. It has a stable complex due to iron polysaccharide attachment, and it has reduced. It is released in intestine duodenum, and the chance of abdominal side effects are significantly less. So this is one of the good advantage because its tolerance is excellent. So if you have an elderly patient in whom you think the GI side effects are there, then it is wise to use a oral iron polysaccharide than the other one because of not better efficacy, but it is because of better tolerance. So this is about the thing. And finally, to say a few words on Texfer, it is 150 milligram. It's an iron complex. It should be taken by mouth. And as I said, it is an iron polysaccharide. It is best absorbed in intestine, and it is taken before or 2 hours after meal. If stomach upset may happen, but however, the incidence of GI side effects is lesser. It is well tolerated. When enters the stomach, there is less chance to react with the hydroxy radical and so on. So it is a stable complex with polysaccharide, and it is fast acting, long lasting medication. The adult dose is 1 capsule daily, or as I said, even if there is intolerance, you can use it alternate day, and there is no such contraindication unless there is a hypersensitivity or iron overload, and hardly any adverse events. The GI side effects are far better when compared to the others. So overdosage and bioavailability is as per any other molecule. With this, I would conclude by saying that iron anemia is a correctable cause of fatigue in cancer patients. It should not be ignored. It should be worked up. So when there is anemia, you have liberal correction of anemia whenever possible, and you always find out iron deficiency. Classify it as functional versus absolute. If there is absolute, always go for oral iron because of cost-benefit ratio and ease of administration. If there is functional iron deficiency and you're using erythropoietin stimulating agents, only then use IV iron. So with this, I would conclude, and I would thank everyone for patient listening.
Thank you, Dr. Chandkant, for taking us through this entire presentation. And of course, you have talked a lot about epidemiological data and various other facets. But Just to summarize some of the points once again. I mean, you have talked about how hemoglobin is inversely related to the hepcidin levels. What are the various grades of anemia, and of course, how chemotherapy and radiation can cause anemia. When to give iron IV, and what are the parameters to assess the iron deficiency. What are the types of iron deficiency you have talked about? You have talked about oral versus parenteral iron. You have talked about the various meta-analysis, because there were a lot of controversies. The meta-analysis is the purest form of evidence which you have talked about. And also, I mean, absolute iron deficiency versus functional iron deficiency you have touched upon. And of course, in brief, of course, you have also touched upon about Taxfer. So now I keep the floor open for any question and answers. And of course, I will request all the doctors to kindly unmute themselves and share their thoughts. And in case they have got any questions, they can also ask that question to Dr. Chandrakant. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, Dr. Bishwas here. So Chandrakant, that was a great talk. So I am asking a purely oncological question. So there are three groups of patients. So one on a neoadjuvant or an adjuvant chemotherapy, this patient has a recurrent anemia. How do you address it? Second, somebody is on a palliative chemotherapy. So how do you, having a frequent anemia, how do you address it? And third, so some patients are on maintenance, PARP inhibitors like olaparib. So 60%, 70% of them has an anemia. So these are three groups of patients. So regular OPD patients. So how do you manage anemia in these three group of patients?
So that's very practical, sir. That's the way we have to think, actually. So if you have adjuvant or a neoadjuvant chemotherapy, that means the patient has limited disease burden. That means the patient having anemia of chronic disease due to limited disease burden is less. So the patient usually has anemia due to nutritional deficiencies or due to marrow suppression to chemotherapy. So in these patients, we must check for reversible causes like iron deficiency, B12, folate, and so on. And that is the only way to go. And we keep transfusion as an option if you want rapid reversal, if less than 7 or whatever level we want to keep. So if it's neoadjuvant, adjuvant, the chance of having a functional iron deficiency is less, chance of anemia from disease is less. It is mainly nutritional or marrow suppression to treatment. So in them, we are not supposed to use erythropoietin stimulating agents. We should use nutritional correction, and we should use transfusion whenever required. If you have a palliative patient, in the sense a patient who has advanced disease where disease control is our aim, then in those patients, it is very likely that this patient has anemia because of anemia of chronic disease, what we say. You do iron levels, it is higher or normal, and you do ferritin, it is higher, still you have anemia. In those patients, there is an option of using erythropoietin stimulating agents. And if you use ESAs, we have to supplement iron even if the iron levels are normal, or if you have any evidence of functional iron deficiency, because it causes an artificial iron deficiency environment. So of course, I would use transfusion as an option, but in the present COVID era, to get admitted for transfusion availability is difficult. Therefore, I would use liberal use of ESAs and iron supplementation, whether oral or IV. Both there is no head-to-head trial that is, there is controversial data. Nothing is superior, nothing is inferior. But if I am using ESA and functional iron deficiency, there is a faster hemoglobin increment if I use IV iron, like the ferric carbamyl maltose, which is there. It is a safer iron and has better bioavailability at the target site. And then in olaparib, again, it is something like chemotherapy-induced anemia. That also has anemia of chronic disease, but none of the guidelines say that we should use ESAs in these targeted therapy drugs. This again we have to manage with oral medications and so on, sir.
Thank you so much.
You can add, sir, if you think anything. So I was just going through literature, sir. Few things I came across. They said that you can use alternate day iron. So this I was not aware. They said if it's not tolerating, give with food or with milk. This is the new that I came across, and they said the threshold for using IV iron has reduced because that era where we used to give IM iron is obsolete. Now IV iron is better tolerable. So IV iron is not that toxic, because there were times where they have compared IV iron and oral iron, and the comparison is with the conventional IV irons where there was increased mortality. So we don't have present day IV iron preparation. So
Present IV iron, so hardly you see any hypersensitivity. So
correct.
normally I use 1000 milligram of this carboxyl maltose.
Correct.
For
That is
the-
the dose. That is the
yeah.
dose
So
recommended, sir.
weekly for 5 doses. So at least now, at least 500 patients I've used. So I'm very comfortable with that. Yeah.
Yes, sir. But some patients where affordability is an issue, or
Yeah, but that
then-
becomes costly. 5 and
Yeah,
5,500
yes.
rupees.
yes,
Almost like 20-25,000 rupees.
yes,
per-
yes.
So that is a cost. Yeah.
Yeah, so then we can use oral formulations. In oral formulations, we have a lot of brands, and we are using Texfer in some patients, and
Texture
it-
is also costly. Costly.
but it's so there is a mention on
Sanath is smiling. So
Oh, yeah.
costly. You know?
but the problem is the good thing is the tolerance and the GI side effects are lesser when compared to others. So that is one thing. So anything Pankaj sir wants to add, or Sanath wants to add, you can add.
Thanad, do you want to add something?
No, boss. You can add.
No, Dr. Sab, you see, the cost is something which is completely related to the value which it provides, and of course, we have ensured that you know the factory from where we are getting it manufactured is the GMP certified, and you know it incurs therefore certain amount of cost. So that's the only reason.
No, sir. As such, even literature says that polysaccharides are difficult to manufacture and it is
Yes,
expensive.
yes.
And I also saw some cost-benefit analysis, and they've shown it is effective on Texfer. It was a very small. I didn't put it up in the slide. Yeah.
Sure. Any other comment by any doctor? Any question? Any comment? Because, sir, this is our first experience. This is our first webinar, and anything which is done for the first time is very, very dear. So we are also very excited because this will set the tone for future, our marketing activities. So that's why any comment from anyone will be most appreciable. Or any questions in case somebody wants to ask. Dr. Neha says, nice presentation, Dr. Chandrakant. So this is what she has. Dr. Neha, if you want, you can come live also and can talk to Dr. Chandrakant.
Please, ma'am.
So it was a very nice presentation from your end, Dr. Chandrakant. And I had come across so many new things. I've learned so much about anemia. I think about all the deficiencies. I might have almost forgotten all these types of deficiencies, absolute, functional. So it is just like a revision sort. So thank you once again for delivering such a beautiful presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Neha. Thanks a lot for your comments. Anyone else? Because I am fully aware that Dr. Chandrakant has got another
No, that's
today,
fine, sir.
another session today. So anyone can comment anything. How did you find? Will you suggest any modification in any way? Because as I've shared in the beginning, I mean, your feedbacks, they're the most essential for us to also, take the right path. So no comments. Okay, so in case there are no comments, then I would like to take this opportunity to thank Dr. Chandrakant for this lovely presentation. And let me tell you, sir, that it was a wonderful. I was trying to jot down some of the points, but still, I mean, I must tell you the type of information what you were sharing. I mean, it was something very, very nice. And you have also.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Just a query. Can the
Yes.
size of the capsule be decreased a little bit? Because I'm a radiation oncologist.
Okay.
And my patients are on radiation and they are having dysphagia because of radiation induced mucositis. So they
Okay.
are unable to swallow this big capsule. It
Okay.
is very difficult. For the initial 1 or 2 weeks, they are able to do so.
Okay.
But down the line, when as the treatment goes beyond 4 to 5 weeks, because of severe mucositis, they are not able to swallow it. So I have to recommend, I have to stop this drug and introduce and ask them to take some preparation which is less, which is smaller in size. So if it is feasible, then you can decrease the size of the capsule.
Thank you very much, Dr. Neha, for your feedback. And definitely we will explore this at our end. And yes, your point is very valid. I mean, if somebody is undergoing some radiation therapy, there could be some difficulty in swallowing large capsules. So we'll definitely explore whether we can, to what extent we can, reduce the size. Yes, Sanat, you
Yeah,
would like to
definitely.
add?
That is we'll work on that, ma'am, and we'll get back
Yes,
to
sir.
you also. Okay, ma'am. Just give some time, 1 or 2 weeks. We'll get back to you, ma'am. Regarding that.
Thank you,
Okay.
Dr. Neha.
Thank you, ma'am.
So as I was sharing, sir, that it was a wonderful presentation, and you have taken us through, in this entire journey. And I would also like to thank all the participants for giving your most precious time, because I mean, I know you have got plethora of webinars. There's no dearth of webinars nowadays, and you have come here. You have made this webinar successful, I would say, and my gratitude to all of you for coming and sparing your valuable time. I'm sure this is just the beginning, and moving forward, we will also try to come out with newer and newer topics after consulting all of you as to what are the impending needs and what type of webinars we should come out. Because fact of the matter is, in this COVID era, most of the organizations we are aware, they are having webinars. So it's very essential. What is the topic? Topic should be of extreme interest, as well as, of course, the person who's going to deal with that topic. Both the things, they are very important. And there, of course, moving forward also, we will take both the aspects into consideration. So thank you once again for this time what you have given. And thanks once again, Dr. Chandrakant, for taking us through. We'll be troubling you even in future also
Sure, sure.
with these type of sessions, because as I've said, I have interacted with you earlier also, some 2-3 years back. And I remember that interaction also, which was very nice. So with this, we will say goodbye and all the very best for this evening. Take good
Thank you,
care
sir.
of yourself. Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Thank you,
sir.
sir. Thank you,
Thank you,
thank you.
sir.
Good night. Bye, sir.
Bye.